Welcome to Serious About Rugby. Today on the agenda we're going to be discussing George Burgess and where he could end up next season. Now, he's in a bit of a strange predicament at the moment. He's 28, but his twin brother Tom has perhaps surpassed him now at Souths. And he's coming to the end of his contract at the end of this year, and he's yet to be offered a new deal. He's still currently coming on off the interchange bench for the Rabbitohs. However, at the moment he's only averaging 25 minutes a game. He's got a recurring hip problem, and prior to this season he turned down a mega money offer from the Eels, which would have probably set him up for life, to stay with South and showed that loyalty. However, now it looks like they might not offer him a new deal, and we don't know where he's going to end up next year. There's talk of Super League. Now, Australian journalist Brent Reid says that there's 4 offers on the table for George, 2 Super League and 2 NRL. One of those Super League offers is believed to be Hull FC. One of the NRL offers is believed to be Brisbane. Parramatta are now not interested in bringing him in next year, so it's kind of... He's a wanted man, but has his value perhaps gone down? Sean, what do you think?
His value's definitely not gone down. He's a top class player. He's an international player, and we all know the sort of impact he would have on any club in the Super League. Any club would take that. If they had the space, it wouldn't even be a question, let's be honest. But the problem is going to be, for the Super League clubs, the problem's going to be managing the salary cap in a way that George Burgess is going to be able to play, which is a lot harder to do in Super League than it is in the NRL. And I don't think there's many teams that would be able to sacrifice big personnel to be able to bring George Burgess in. You look at St Helens, Warrington, they've already got big players in for the coming 2 or 3 years. They're not going to be able to sacrifice some of those big players to bring in George Burgess, especially somebody that's been known to have certain recurring injuries that it's a bit too much of a risk. I suppose you could argue that St Helens are potentially going to lose Alex Walmsley and Luke Thompson. And if that does happen, then George Burgess maybe is the option to go for, to bring sort of that stability back into the front row, somebody that's been there and done it at the top level. I was a bit disappointed at the start of the year, to be honest. As somebody that follows the Parramatta, I thought that would have been a good stepping stone for us personally. Obviously finished bottom of the ladder last year, but the way that Parramatta have started the season, maybe we don't need them after all. So maybe that withdrawal has been good for Parramatta in the long term. Brisbane, I'm not really sure what's up with Brisbane this year, because they seem like they can put it together, but there's no sort of consistency there, and maybe bringing in somebody that can dominate the front row consistently and has done for a number of years would be the way forward. I do think he'll come to Super League.
Really?
I do think he'll come to Super League. I feel like there's a lot of tiptoeing around the issue at the minute, and I think the only thing that would keep him in the NRL is somebody offering him big. And I don't think anybody would be willing to risk big money at this point for George Burgess, which is why I think Super League will come. I think there's enough Super League teams that could sacrifice personnel to bring him in, but this is a limited... I think Hull are one of those teams. Hull could sacrifice a lot of personnel to bring him in. I think Saints, if they lose Walmsley and Thompson, could bring him in. But other than that, they're your 2 for me. I struggle to see who else could be in line for it, really. Given that a lot of clubs are really close to the capacity on salary cap. Leeds have obviously just signed another prop forward, so you can't imagine that they're going to be fair enough away from the cap to allow space for George Burgess to come in. So yeah, but Hull I think is the one. I think Hull's the one for him. I think Hull will be looking to turn over a lot of personnel in the summer, to try and make a bit of space, and we already know that Hull have got a very dominant pack. If George Burgess was added to it, I think that they'll almost become unstoppable.
Now, George has actually come out and said in the Australian media this week, on returning to the Super League, he said, "It all depends on what the deal is really. I'd have to see if it's right for the family. I've got a wife and 3 young kids now, so I'd have to look at the options and weigh everything up. But it wouldn't be off the table, that's for sure." Now, come to you, Matt, because George is a boyhood Leeds fan, but Leeds have already got marquee players. And then the other question is, we talk about their freeing up space on the salary cap, but George is going to have to be a marquee player, isn't he? Let's be honest here. And how many clubs or how many players can you remember who are forwards who've been brought in as marquee players? Because it's a very limited number off the top of my head, and I know Leeds have brought in Trent Merrin this year, and for me, he's had a good season, considering where Leeds are. However, he's getting a lot of stick because people are expecting miracles from him, but that's not his job.
No.
So, for one, a team, who can he go to, and who's going to make him a marquee player?
Well, on the topic of Leeds, they can sign him, but they have to get rid of quite a few of the players that are drifting about. You've got your Ablets, you've got John Buchanan who's leaving, Dom Crosby's injured again, he's not going to play. There's so many players that shouldn't, like, you know, Ashton Golding, there's a few of us that they're just there, they're taking up cap, but they shouldn't really be there because they're never going to get a game. And then they could bring him in. The problem we've got is he's a marquee player, but he's playing 25 minutes in the NRL, which is bumping up Super League standards. We're talking 35 minutes. But then he's bad hip as well. As soon as that hip goes again, we've got this issue where he's on big money. He's not really playing because he's out a few games, and it'd be massive for Leeds if they could somehow get him. But then everyone would be pointing the finger saying they're breaking the carp or whatever. But he'd be the perfect fit for them. But like you've said already, I think he's a Hull player. A bit like Gareth Ellis. When he went to Hull, it was a massive deal. I think it'd be the same for George Burgess going to Hull.
Now, you touched on it there, the risk with it is the injury, isn't it? Now, you've got to feel he might not be absolutely killing it at the moment, but he's obviously still valued at Sal's because they're keeping him on the interchange bench to play these 25-30 minutes a game. But is that the reason they're not offering him a new deal? Because the risk of him going, perhaps upsetting Sam, upsetting Tom, it'd be massive. Surely they would keep him if he was absolutely necessary and they weren't worried about this.
Yeah, I think you can't really worry about Sam and Tom. The professionals, they know the game. Obviously, they spent a lot of years together. They'll be thankful for the years they've spent together because obviously that's a special sort of group that we've had at Sal's. But it's a job at the end of the day, and you come to an age where you're going to have to start moving on. Sam Burgess is obviously an exception in the case that he is just one of the best players in the world, so he didn't have to leave. George Burgess, unfortunately, not quite as good as his brother, so has to look for that next professional step like every other player in the world does. Like I said, there could be offers on the table from the NRL, but I think the NRL clubs are a lot more careful with the money and the way that they play. I think maybe the 25 minutes, 30 minutes is a bit... I feel like it's a bit harsh to look at that stat straight up because I feel like that depends on the coaching style of certain teams. And I think Sal's have got a forward pack that's so dominant that George doesn't need to play a lot long minutes. I feel like when he's fully fit, if he's needed to play long minutes, he can play long minutes.
Yeah, it's a bit misleading.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a misleading stat that sort of doesn't sum up his capability as a player. I think if he came over to Super League, you'd see him playing 55, 60-minute games for whoever he's signed for. Like I said, I think Hull would be the right fit. Like you said, sort of similar to Ellis when he came over but again, you'd have to sacrifice some big personnel. Maybe the likes of Mike Minicello would have to leave the club after big stints. People that are on big money. I don't necessarily agree they would have to be a marquee signing. I think
you just have to shift enough. I
think you have to shift a big enough wage, and he might be third highest on the list. But it's a big enough wage shifted to get him in, and. Your biggest problem then is obviously in the Super League this year we've had a lot of problems with injuries. Maybe even the last 3 years, every team seems to be struggling more and more with injuries. And maybe if you're shifting a lot of players to bring in a big player, you are going to struggle to bring in the reserves. And maybe that's a massive step for the reserve grade and the reserve grade coming into play to be able to sign players off one-off basis from the reserve team to be able to cover these injury problems.
Yeah. Now, Mark, I'll give you this scenario. For this very moment, you're George Burgess, you've got on the table a 4-year offer from Hull, or on the same one you can go to Brisbane Broncos for 2 years. Where would you go?
Longevity, go to Hull. Family, yeah.
I think if this statement is read properly and he just wants to do what's right for his family, obviously moving across the world isn't ideal, but he's moving across the world to go home. He's not moving across the world to go and play in America and make a brand new start of life. Yeah, for the kids it would be a bit of a shock to the system because they'd have to experience and start something new, start a new life. But if he really wants to do what's right for the family, you would assume that he want to take a long deal just to make sure that he is getting money for an extended period of time.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, guys. Hull is better than Brisbane. Where do you think George will end up? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.